I'm a software support and data analysis specialist here at OneRain, and today we'll be talking about administrator basics in Contrail. This session departs from our usual a little bit because typically we've done administrator basics in 2 sessions. Today we'll be trying to fit a lot of material all into one. So hopefully this will be a good review for a lot of you who have been around for a while, and maybe you'll pick up some new things, and hopefully, we'll get started soon. So let's go ahead and I will switch over my screen real fast. Let's look at Contrail. So here we are on our demonstration page in Contrail, demonstration.onerain.com. The user side is open to the general public. However, since we are looking at administration basics, this will take place on the administration side, which is only accessible via using a user account and logging in. So to see if I'm logged in, I can go ahead and click on the profile button in the upper right-hand corner, and it will show me my username and offer the log in, log out option. I am noticing I'm not logged into the correct account, so I'm going to switch that over real fast. So let's go ahead, get that going. Email, you can enter your email if that's your username. Otherwise, you should enter in your username here. So we'll do great. So back to the same screen, and since I'm logged in and my user account does have the appropriate credentials, I can click on the administration option, which will switch us over to the administration environment. So we've got a lot to get through. As I've said, the first thing I want to cover is administering and creating new user accounts in Contrail. So to do that, we can take one of 2 options. One is using the quick link for users in the administration landing page, or we can go to the configuration menu on the nav bar on the left side, open that, and select users. So here we have 2 users here. I'm going to go through the process of adding in a new user so you can see that entire process from start to finish. So we'll click on the add button to start, add a new user, give them a name. So this is going to be the email address. We need an email address so that way if somebody forgets their password, they can use our forgot password feature in order to reset that password. So the email is a required feature. So I'll just use Contrail support here. And then when we tab to the next field, it will either autofill the email address for a username. You can use that, or you can input your own username of your choosing. So for me, I'm going to do super. Password, let's go ahead, we'll enter in a password for this user. Then finally on the right side, we'll input some additional options. The phone number is optional. It's not used anywhere within the Contrail interface at this time, but it is nice to have in case we do need to get in contact with our user or in case you need to get in contact with the user. So I usually put one in just for the sake of being concise. Date and time. So what time zone do you want this data to show in? A quick background is when we are storing data in Contrail, we store all of that in UTC within the database, and then we convert that for each individual user so that way they can view it in their own preferred time zone. So since I'm in Mountain Time, I am going to switch to US Mountain. You can also format the date and time. However, since this is the recommended format for and the required format for all of our date range pickers, just keep that in mind that some features may not work exactly as you would expect if you do change the format of the date and time. It is still an option to change those. Just keep an eye out for when you're copying and pasting different things. I usually will leave them as the default just because I like to keep things all in one. So then for display, we can choose the base map. Which do we want to be our default when we look at any map? I prefer the light one personally, but the standard will be default. And then what view do we want to be the default view when anybody looks at a map, a list, etc. So Colorado view is good for me here. So let's go ahead, click save. After we've added this new user, we have the option to assign the user privileges. Each user is customizable on what privilege level they have based on each individual privilege. We don't have settings specifically for basic user and administrator. So that way you're able to really customize the access levels for each individual. In general, this list is ordered from the most damage somebody can do to the least damage somebody can do. So a very basic user is going to have maybe view options, whereas an administrator is going to have settings all the way to the top, including things like delete sites, systems, users. So because this is going to be a basic user I've created, I'm only going to assign a few very basic privilege levels, like view raw data, they can view invalid data, they can see alarms, but they can't set their own alarms. Um, you know, basic review and reports here. An administrator, though, like I said, we would check the boxes here all the way up to the top. And as you might have noticed, every time I check a box, it adds the privilege level. Whereas if I uncheck it, it will save and remove that. So it is automatically saving each time I make a change on this particular page. Finally, I can click continue and it will take me back to the list with that new user created. So a couple things now that this user is created. I selected the name. If I want to make changes, I can click on the edit button or open the edit drop-down menu and see a few more options. Changes to privileges lie in here. If I want to make changes to a password, I can go to that password option and manually change it myself. However, my personal preferred method is to go to the reset button, and that will ask for the username, and I can send an email to that person directly, so that way I don't have to relay password information. They'll get a link where they can set their own password. So personally, I really like making use of this forgot your password logic. That's also available on the login page in case you have forgotten your password and want to trigger it from there. Great. So with that being users, let's go ahead and take a look at another non-data related administration feature, which is web administration. So let's go back to the administration landing page. Again, two different ways we can get to that web module, either through web or configuration and web, and they'll both take you to the same place. Now this web module is where you can administer features that impact the appearance of your Contrail page. So for example, the logo, this is the primary logo that shows up here in this upper left-hand corner. When I minimize this menu, only that primary logo will show. So our recommendations are that this logo is at maximum 70 pixels by 70 pixels. Then that secondary logo is a text-based logo that goes in that secondary position. It disappears when the screen is minimized, and our recommendations are that that is 140 by 70 pixels maximum. You do also have the ability to add a background or change the background color. So for example, when I'm going to open the home page in another tab, we have it on this landing page where there is currently no background and no background color. However, if I go in here, open that up, I can change the color. I can upload a picture to stretch across the back if I want. Changing the color, you can choose whatever color, enter in the hex code that you want. We'll make it green just so you see the contrast, and then I'm going to change it right back because I'm not sure that I'm a fan of that green. Click save. Now if I go to the home page and click refresh, you can see where that change is made. It's that bar right across the top. Like I said, I'm changing it back because that color does not really go for us. So we want that to go back to white. Save. And just to make sure it changed. Super. So those are your images, your background, and those are really for your personal branding of the user side. This will not impact the administration side. That is where the OneRain Contrail branding will remain. Other things we can do with web administration is going to be your homepage. Any changes that you want to make to your homepage will take place in the Pages module on the right-hand side under Links, and it's going to be listed as home. One quick note that I want to make about this is you can see that there is an add button on this pages module, and that will add text to existing pages. This will not add new pages into Contrail. If you want to add new pages, what I recommend instead is creating a dashboard for whatever content you're looking to make. At this time, we don't have a mechanism for adding in new custom pages, so that dashboard option is going to be your best bet. So for changing the home page, however, we'll go to clicking on the home page that's already existing. We can see that the path corresponds with the path when we're looking at the link for the home page. There's nothing after it. It is just your domain name. So when you're making changes to that home page, that will impact this field, that main square, this main panel in the middle of your home page here. It does not impact the background around it. It doesn't impact the nav bar. Those are all features that are static within Contrail and hard-coded into our software. So those are not changeable. However, this main panel in the middle of the home page is something that you can change. So from the page, we can open up the edit option here. And then you have two options for modifying your home page. You can use this WYSIWYG editor. It helps with, some basic formatting and plain text options. You can add in links and images, drop those in, change your text. Otherwise, if you're a little bit more savvy with HTML and CSS, you can open up the source code by going to the Tools menu and clicking on Source Code. And this will open a pop-up where you can make changes to that. And I'll admit that that's a lot of what we do when we are constructing home pages, simply because we have a little bit more control over what we add and the formatting of that. However, not everybody's comfortable with that, so everything should be changed according to your own comfort level. But you do have the ability to make those changes yourself, so please feel free to make use of that. So I'm going to click OK. I don't have any changes to make today. And we will cancel because I didn't make any changes. Super, so let's back up to web, go through a few other options. So when you're on that user side, you've also noticed that there is a news option in that nav bar. Those news articles are posted from the web module, excuse me. Open up that link for news, and you can see that we have the ability to add a new post, give it a name, content with the content editor, and then we also have options for publishing it, privileging it so that only logged in users with the privilege can see it, and we can also pin it so that it shows up first and foremost on the user homepage. So for an example on that, I'll do a sample news post, if my keyboard will catch up. There we go. All right, so if I save it here, we've got a pretty basic news post. If I go to the home page, let's look at news. There is my sample news post. It shows who posted it as well as when. Then also, if I want to make this a pinned news post, I can go to Edit, click Yes, save it. Let's go on back to the home page, and now you can see where that will appear. That will by default appear at the top of the page. That does not have an option to be moved elsewhere on this home page right now. So let's go back. I don't really like that, so we're going to delete that right out of there by clicking delete, and it asks me if I'm sure I want to delete it. As a side note, all deletes in Contrail are permanent. We don't have an undo delete button, so please make sure that when you are deleting content, whether that be data, news posts, images, anything with the delete button, make sure that you actually truly want that gone, because it won't come back once it's gone. Great. So news, we can also do administration for the shared bookmarks that will show up on the user side, any files that you have uploaded, and then there is an option to put in a style sheet here. Personally, I prefer to add in any of my CSS that I'm adding for formatting. If I'm doing custom HTML, I prefer to do that in line on the page where I'm putting it. So if I'm doing a home page, I will put that CSS style sheet in line on that page rather than putting it here, but that is an option as well. All right, so now what you're really here for is going to be the data. This administration, users, web stuff is great, but I'm sure that everybody really uses Contrail for the data. So I will start and kind of keep working my way through that. With that, starting with systems. Now, systems serve as our pipelines for bringing data into Contrail as well as out of Contrail. We have 3 different types of input systems. Those are collectors, agents, and the data exchange. So a little bit more detail. Collectors are things like your alert collector, your satellite collector. There are a couple of other options as well. Basically, if the data is constantly being pushed into Contrail, we use a collector so that we are always listening for those new reports being pushed our way. Opposite of that are going to be our agents. Agents are what we use to reach out and pull data into Contrail. So this is going to be most of what you see on my screen right now. Your HADS agent, your METAR agent, your USGS agent. All of these use the APIs that are present at those organizations in order to bring data into Contrail. Then finally, I mentioned the data exchange, and this kind of serves as both an input system and an output system type in that data exchange makes use of the Contrail API to either bring data into Contrail or send it out of Contrail, depending on what we're looking at. I won't be talking too much about output systems today. However, output systems can be used to set up a data feed to transfer data out of Contrail to your own agency, if you have a different website or a different database that you want the data populated in, or to a different agency altogether. We often worked with the National Weather Service to transfer data from agencies over there. Some GIS departments will want that. So we have options in there, including the API, kind of a generic pushing event data option, as well as Chef A and Chef E options. So we'll have another webinar soon talking about how to set those all up and what those might entail. Today, I want to stick with bringing data into Contrail, so let's keep moving in that general direction. I'm going to use the USGS option as our example for today, so clicking on that. And this takes us to this new USGS system. I'm sorry, this is not new. This is an existing USGS system. So we can see a couple details at a glance, what's the description, what client does this belong to, when did it last process, summaries of how many sites, how many sensors are in this system, as well as the existing sensor types. Sensor types need to be configured for all existing systems before you will be allowed to add sensors to that. These sensor types basically serve as defaults for those sensors. So that way, when you create a new sensor, you don't have to set up all of the existing details over and over. You have this template basically where you can use that to configure a new sensor each time and make it quick and easy. So we'll be setting up a new site and a new set of sensors in this USGS system today. So to do so, I can either go to sites, or since I'm already in the system I want to add it to, I'm going to click on sites here. So this list of sites are all of the existing sites within this system that are collecting USGS data. We can see a couple of things at a glance about the status of these sites. The alarm bell means that there is a sensor that is in alarm at these sites. If there's the little alarm clock, that shows that that site is timed out. And then the little wrench shows that that site has been marked as out of service. So we get this kind of what is happening with these sites at a glance just by looking at this list. So we've got two different options for adding USGS sensors, and those who have been around for a while kind of know the previous option that we had where we click on add, go to the NWIS site and find all the information. But today I want to demonstrate one of our new features, which is the find option. So to do that, I'm going to go to the drop-down menu and select find. And what this does basically is builds into Contrail an existing way to look for sites within a particular range. So you can see I've got this search bar for metadata. I want to look for sites first, and then I can put in the bounding box of where do I want to look for sites? What are those latitudes? What are those coordinates? So for today, I am going to be looking in Western Colorado for a site. And so my coordinates that I'm looking for are going to be something like, let's go for 39. My keyboard is running behind again. I'm sorry. Must be time to change the batteries. There we go. Finally starts kicking in. 39.1 north. And let's look for the south bounding latitude. We are going to do 39.0. Then for east, we need the negative signs because we are in the USA here. Let's go for negative 108.3. Okay, we got part of that, negative 108.3, and then for the west we'll do negative 108.4. Cool, so we've got a region that we're going to look for sites and sensors in, so I'll click save. And you can see that we have an option here. One showed up within that range. Now, this is a really cool feature. It's also a new feature, so I recommend at the start, please keep those areas that you're searching in small. Don't look over, thousands of square miles to try to return things, because this is still a basic feature and it will overload things. So start with a small region and then build up from there. But what this gave me was all of the information that I need in order to start creating a new site. So I can see the agency, I can see the site number, and that's going to become the site ID. I can see the station name, that will become my site name. We've got our latitude, longitude, any other information. Cool. There's also, if you're going to be doing a bulk import, a sheet at the bottom that can be used as a template for your import sheet. So we've got the site ID, site name, latitude, longitude, and elevation down here as well. So I'm going to leave this page open just so that I can refer to it. But other than that, I'm going to go back. Okay, let's do that again. Yes, I want to resubmit that form. Super. Let's go ahead and open in a new tab, go back and create my new site now, where I'll go to add. So let's see if I can get these two going in different options, different pages, and spread this out so we can see both at the same time. Super, there we go. So on my right side is where I'm adding, on my left side is where I'm referring to for the data. So adding a new site, we've got the system specified where we want the data to come through. Then let's look at the site name. I'm going to just copy it from the import sheet down here because I'm being a little lazy. I'm going to copy the site name. Then we want the site ID. We're going to copy that, paste to that. Display, what view do we want this to appear in? Now I'll cover views in just a minute. However, we do need to specify a view here. So let's do the Colorado view. This is a site that's located in Colorado. That's great. So copy then the latitude, bring that over. The longitude, a little too much going on there. Copy that, bring that over. And the elevation is optional, but we'll bring that into, just to be concise, 4670. Got it. So now for the site, I can specify my options. Do I want it published? Do I want it privileged? Yes, I want it published. No, I don't want it privileged. I want y'all to be able to see what I'm doing too. So click save. Super, so now I have a brand new site in here, but there's no sensors, so there is not going to be any data. As you may have guessed, a site basically serves as the physical location for all of the data. It has a set of coordinates, so this is basically what a lot of you guys might think of as a station. That would be what we call a site in Contrail. Sensors serve as the individual data types, data points that we are bringing in. So we would set up distinct sensors for discharge, for stage, for rain accumulation, temperature. Each individual type of data is going to be its own sensor, even though there might be the same physical piece of equipment that is measuring all of this out in the field. So what we can do now is I'm going to return back to my find, and instead of looking for sites, I'm now going to look for sensors and see what options are available. So leaving the same bounding coordinates and click save should refresh my page with a couple of options for bringing in data. See, there's two different sensor options here. One is discharge and one is gauge height. Now in Contrail, I usually refer to these as stage and flow. So I'm going to stick with that naming convention just to keep things consistent with how we've done things in the past. One other thing that I do want to clarify with this find option is that this does not serve as an automatic bring in all of these features option. You do still have to manually add the site and sensors, but it does serve as a little bit more streamlined option for looking for those sites and sensors rather than having to go out to the third-party site and go through their different search mechanisms. So I do just want to clarify that point quickly before we proceed. So sensors, adding a new in the sensors, we want to go to the add option. And then now this is where we'll really make use of those existing sensor types so that I don't have to refill in all of these fields. Just confirming the system is where I want it. USGS, the site, yep, that's what we just created. So the first sensor I'm going to add will be the stage sensor. So under sensor type, let's look for stage. And now when that refreshes, it shows all of the existing metadata for that sensor type. So that's great. Really, the only step that I have that remains here is going to be to add in the sensor ID, which is nice for me in this import sheet here. That is going to be this number next to stage. Great, paste that in, and then I'll do a quick once over just to make sure everything really matches what I need. Oh, okay, so one thing I do need to change, the date and time. This sensor is not in the Eastern time zone, it is actually in the Mountain time zone, so I do need to make a quick change there. Other than that, I'm happy with the way everything else looks here. Just a quick description of what we're looking at though. Date and time, that time zone will refer to the time zone in which that data is being collected, so that does need to match the source. Calibration, this is going to be how do we want to convert the data from the source, from its raw value so that it appears in a finished value. For things with data agents like the USGS, like METAR, we usually only use the direct conversion option. However, in alert data, some satellite data, other options, you may see that we'll use things like the linear option, applying an equation, using the increment up feature, or using the table to look for ratings tables to convert stage into flow, for example. Those are all options for conversions in here. That slope refers to a multiplier value. So in that linear option, that's going to be your m in your y equals mx plus b plus c. Whereas those offset and references are going to be those additive values. Those are your b's and c's there. Options, we can individually publish or privilege settings. Your level is your level of validation. For pretty much everything, you'll want to use the all standard validations performed. However, if you're looking at alert data, just alert, not alert 2, you'll want to use all standard validations for your alert sensor. And this has an added validation level for looking to make sure that that integer raw value falls between 0 and 2047, as is designated by its protocol. In your value column, this value max is the maximum allowed value, whereas the value min is the minimum allowed value. And if it falls outside of that range, it will be marked as invalid. Same goes for your delta here. Your positive delta is the change between two consecutive values, two consecutive reports received, and that negative is still that change, but in the other direction. So for example, let's say that the stage sensor picks up a reading that starts at 5 feet, and then the next value that comes in is going to be 11 feet. Well, that difference is a positive delta of 6, which is higher than our set validation for 5. So that would be marked as PD and considered invalid. Now, if it were to fall back from that 11 reading down to 5 again, that's a negative delta of -6. So that would fall outside of our 5 here, and that would be marked as ND. For the negative delta, you do not need to include the minus sign. It is already built into the software, so we make that assumption for you. So great, I'm happy with the way this looks. Let's go ahead, click save, and keep moving forward. So now I've got a stage sensor in here. It hasn't had any reports yet because our agent runs on a timer. Every about 15 minutes or so, it will reach out and pick up for some more data. So let's check back on this one and go and do another sensor fast. Just to round out this site, I'll add in that flow volume. So do this one quickly. You don't need to hear the whole explanation. We'll do the flow rate, add in the sensor ID from that import sheet. I'm just going to copy that over, paste that over, do a quick glance, make sure all of these settings match what I want. That still doesn't match what I want, so I want that to be mountain for my date and time. And I'm happy with the rest, so I'll click save. So now when I go back to that site, I have two different sensors, flow rate and stage, and those should start reporting probably within the next 15 minutes, I would say. From this site, I can see other information like the site details. I can add notes or images to this site, which will show up on both the admin side and the user side. And then there's also a map giving me some context for where this site actually is. And it looks like this is just outside of Palisade, Colorado. So that's a beautiful area. Looking at the sensors in a little bit more detail, I'll click on the stage. And honestly, I think this would better go over if I had a sensor with some more data. So I'm going to jump back and click on sites instead of looking at that list for that particular. Let's find one of my existing sites and look at something that does have data. So let's make this screen some bigger. And looking at the site list, we have a whole bunch of options. I'm going to go ahead and we will do Boulder Creek near Longmont. Great. And let's look at the flow rate there. So with this, we can see a lot of the things that we would normally see on the user side. It gives you the data, how that's all broken down. As a reminder, the large timestamp is going to be your report time, whereas your receive time is listed just below when you hover over the minutes ago. The latency will serve as the difference between those options, and that is present in a lot of our agents because the data isn't always made available immediately to the general public. For example, the USGS, even though it has 15-minute data, it only publishes new data once every hour. So you will see there is latency up to 1 hour at this site. That is to be expected. On the right-hand side, we've got our two values. One is our finished value, and that has the engineering units. Our raw value is in parentheses, and that is the value that we receive from the source and is before it undertakes any conversion. Beneath all that is our data quality tag. Hovering over it will give kind of a description of what we're looking at. Anything in general that is green or starts with A is good, valid data, whereas anything that, is a different color other than green is going to be your invalidated data, and that spans multiple categories from surpassing your maximum value, your negative delta, it came in during maintenance mode, many different options. In general, invalidated data will not be used to trigger alarms. It will not be used to graph data. However, it will still be stored off in the database. Additionally, from the site, we can look at different ranges of data. I can go into the data menu to make changes to it if I want to, or I can add annotations or delete individual data points. I usually don't manually edit too much of the data simply because I believe it was received in a certain form, and if it's not what I expect, then I need to make changes to my validation or my calibration. But those options do exist should you need to make those changes. For things like revalidating a range of data, we'll go to the drop-down menu, and then there's that edit option, add to add a point, revalidate is what I was just talking about. So this will basically reprocess any data as if it were just received again. You specify the range that you want to revalidate over, save it, and it submits it as a job that will be processed on the server in that manner. Once it's finished, you will see that the receive time has been updated and the latency, because like I said, it has been processed again as if it were just received. The report time, however, will remain untouched. Finally, we have the option to add thresholds on the admin side. I can go ahead, click the add button, and add in individual thresholds so that we can see specific points that mean something at this location. So if I wanted to know, what the peak flow rate here was, I can type in a name, description, and designate a level. Now, a side note, these levels don't have any inherent hierarchy within Contrail, but they are used kind of just to sort things out and add tags to it. So I use informational kind of just as my default. You can do what your agency requires. The value, what is the peak flow rate? Well, to be honest with you, I don't know what the peak flow rate at this location is, but I'm just going to make something up and say it got, it was really flowing hard, and we're going to go 1,000 CFS. I can designate what color I want that to be. I'd say that's a red color if it's, moving fast. And then display options. Do I want this to automatically display on the graph? Yes. Do I want this to show up on the map as one of those colored tags should the current value surpass the threshold. Yes. Okay, cool. So we'll click save. And now it lists up here, and I will also be able to see this threshold in multiple other locations. So in the essence of time, I could go on about this for many, many more minutes, but I am going to move on to a different topic. I said I would cover views next, so let's take a look at what views consist of. I'm going to switch over to configuration, then down to views, and we'll see the list of all of the views that I have currently configured. In general, views serve as collections of different sites regardless of the input option. So you can show all sites, you can show a collection of sites based on a geographic region, you can show a collection of sites based on the collection mannerism. There are many, many different options because views are very flexible. Through this list, you can see we've kind of got an option for all of them here. We've got all sites, we've got a couple of geographic regions with Colorado, Front Range, Mohawk River. We've got a couple where it looks at different collection types with HADS, METAR, SNOTEL, USGS, and even different types of data that we're looking at, like water quality. We'll also go through, and I think let's go ahead and add in a new view, and we'll do one for weather stations here. So I'm creating a new view, clicked on the add button, type in a name for it. I'll call it weather stations. Can add a description. I'm just going to use the same as my name because I'm not super creative like that. Again, we can publish or privilege these. So let's click save. Super. So I've got a view, but there's nothing in it because I haven't added my sites yet. So edit, go to the drop-down menu and select sites. And this is where we'll add in those particular sites to the view. I can use the find option if I have something in particular. I know that METAR stations are usually plain old weather stations. They don't have other options. So I'm going to start typing through, went for METAR, and let's go in and just add those in. Every time I check a box, it will add it to the view without me having to save it. So I'm just going to check all of those. Looks great. Is the One Rain weather station in here? Oh, look at that, it is. So this is our weather station at our office, so I'll add that one as well. And now I can go down. I don't have to save this page because it was automatically saving as I added those, but I'll click continue. And now when I come back here, you can see that I have a preview of what that view looks like already in my left-hand side. Shows me where those sites are. That's all in that view. So that's great. And views, they really appear in many different places in Contrail. They're the primary mechanism for displaying data on the user side, so they're very important for that. However, we also see them in lists of sites, lists of sensors. We can sort things out that way when we're looking at alarms. We can sort them out for reports. So they really serve as one of the main backbones within Contrail. So I've mentioned a couple of other things in here in talking about that. Let's go and do a brief overview of alarms. Alarms is going to be something that we will have an entire webinar dedicated to coming up in the near future. So I'm not going to do too much here, but I'll give you kind of the basic structure of what happens with alarms. So the first thing that I do when I'm going to be looking at an alarm is to check and make sure that all of the contacts that I want any notification to go to are currently listed. So I'll first go to the contacts, and here's my list of all existing contacts, and that's great. We've got many different options here. We've got a couple different email addresses. We've got Contrail support. We've got our field team in here, a couple of personal email addresses within, and a couple of cell phone numbers. So that's great. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Just want to make sure that everybody that I would want to contact is currently here. If they weren't, I could go to the add button, and the address is going to refer to their contact information. Unfortunately, right now, we add in one address, whether that is the cell phone number, whether that's an email address for each name. You cannot add multiple addresses per name at this time. So each individual entry is an individual entry. That sounds redundant. So when you name them, I recommend giving them a name like Lindsay Needus-email, Lindsay Needus-cell. That way you can easily sort through your list of contacts and see what is what there. I can also do, let's see, if I wanted to send an email to our sales team, so we could do sales at onerain.com. And then I would say One Rain sales email. Great, click enter, and now we've got that address added to our list. I can also go ahead, click on an existing address, and it gives me kind of a summary of what groups this email address might be a part of, any individual rules they might be on, all sorts of different options for summaries there. I can also go through after adding contacts and make sure that my contact is added to any of the groups. I'm sorry, I just clicked it on the exact same thing. I meant to click on groups. Make sure that they're added to any groups that they should be added to. So, you know, text messages, that would probably be a group that can be added to emails to go out to all people in that group for text messages. So groups serve as your distribution lists that are managed within Contrail. This is a great alternative to individually listing contacts on a delivery, simply because it is an easy way to add new people to those deliveries without having to go to each individual delivery to add in new names. You just add them to a group and bam, they're on everything then. So that's a really nice way to kind of more efficiently manage your contacts with respect to alarms. So I said, okay, let's do a rule. Let's do a rule. I'll click on rules next. Rules serve as the mechanism for evaluating when an alarm should be raised with respect to the data. So our rules and our alarms kind of work on Boolean logic. So it will look at the equation and see if that evaluates to true or false. If it's true, then the alarm will be triggered and any associated deliveries will be sent out. If it's false, then it will remain in your delivered set. Can you still hear me? My headset just yelled at me that I might be losing audio. It sounds
No,
like
you're okay, Lindsay.
Okay, thank you, Rosemary. I just got the notification in my ear, recharge headset, so I appreciate that. Please let me know if my audio drops out all of a sudden.
Will do.
Thanks. All right, so as I was saying, that operates on Boolean logic. If it evaluates to false, it will remain in an inactive state. So today, let's do a we'll do a rule for system latency on a, we'll do a rule for the last value for one of those sensors that we just set up. So I'll go ahead, we'll click on add and find the sensor that I just created today, the site that I just created. That would be the Colorado River below Grand Valley. So I've selected that from the view. You can also select per system. Doesn't really matter, just a way of finding things. And then let's look at the stage sensor. Clicking on stage. So we'll be evaluating this rule against the data that comes in at that stage sensor. This basic example that I'll do is just going to be looking at data from one sensor. However, in Contrail, you can do rules to look at data from multiple sensors. You can take into consideration the same data from the same sensor, but in different parameters. They can be as simple or as complex as you want. So this one, we're going to keep it pretty simple for today. We will say, this is going to be a flood stage rule. And then for this particular location, I know that a flood stage is going to be pretty high, and I don't want this to trigger yet. So we are going to go in for our equation. Again, there are those levels, kind of what we saw at the threshold. Again, no inherent hierarchy here, just a way of categorizing your different rules. My equation, these do have to use predefined functions within Contrail. We have a list of them in our documentation at help.onerain.com. Otherwise, you can start typing and it will offer you suggestions based on what you're looking for. So I know that I want to look for the last value. So if I start typing in last value, there's my option. Great, so we'll do the last value. I want to receive an alarm if that is greater than or equal to, let's say 10 feet. I almost started typing in feet. You do not need to use the units here, so we will just leave that as 10. The hold off equation, this basically serves as a feature for silencing excess notifications. Let's say that, you know, this is a river that is rising and falling rapidly. All I want to know is when it hits that value for the first time, and I don't really care if it hits that multiple times within the same day. So what I could do is add in a time sense trigger parameter here and say, okay, I don't want to be notified if the time since the trigger is less than 24 hours. And then I wouldn't receive additional notifications that this rule was active. It would still show in Contrail as being active. I just wouldn't get additional notifications. I'm going to leave this blank for today, however, just for the sake of time. So who do I want this to go out to? I can start typing and that will give me a couple of options. So Contrail support, I can add in contacts individually. I can also add in groups. So let's say I want this to go to the text messages group. Well, I can type in text and there's my group right there. Great. So we've got this going out to a couple of different people. Deliveries, we can add in many different people. Effectively, this delivery field looks like your standard email composition field. We've got the to, it indicates who this is coming from. For those of you who are in Contrail Cloud servers, you will need to keep the domain on the from as being @onerain.com. Otherwise, that from might be modified to match what your IT indicates that needs to be. Technically, we can change this, but notification@onerain.com is our default because we've noticed that this does not get blocked quite as frequently. So we like to keep this as it is if possible. So the subject, what do we want this to have as a subject line when it comes through? I can type in something like flood stage, or I can use kind of these keywords to automatically populate this if I want. I'm going to keep it simple today, and we'll say flood stage at, and we'll mix in a keyword. I can do brackets and start looking, and site name. That wasn't name. I want name, please. So that way it will automatically populate with the site name for the sensor that is supplying the data for this alarm. You can type in a message as well. Note about the messages is whereas Contrail doesn't enforce character restrictions, we do recommend that you keep an eye on who you're sending this out to and the format. When sent out as a text message, it could be trimmed down and split into multiple messages just based on carrier protocols. You know, typical SMS protocol cuts it off at about 160 characters. So depending on the phone of your recipient, their carrier, that message could come through a little garbled. So our ultimate recommendation is if you're sending out multiple deliveries, have a very simple one that you send out via text message and a more detailed one that will go to that same group, but their email addresses. Since this is mixed messaging here, I'm sending it both to text and email. I'm going to leave this very basic. I'm going to say, if I can type properly, flood stage at so that way it will fill in with the value that triggered this alarm. And that's going to be my basic delivery there. So I have that the delivery is enabled, and I'm going to enable send clear. So that way when this alarm clears, I will also receive a message. Great, so we click save, and now we can review this new rule that I have in place. It looks at the stage sensor at this new Colorado River site and evaluates to see if the last value is greater than or equal to 10 feet. If that is not the case, then it will remain inactive. If that value is above 10 feet, then it will trigger. I can click on next to this equation and do a quick, what does this, yep, doesn't do anything because I don't have any extra, I'm not referring to extra sites in here or extra sensors, so not the extra hint that I was looking for here, but that's great. My delivery summary, this is kind of a brief sample of what it would look like when it goes out. That's great. I can also add in notes if I want, why do we have this particular rule? Is there a history of us needing something like this? And then finally, the summary, I'll actually switch to one of our existing rules just so you can see what that looks like, something that has triggered before. This rule is currently turned off. However, it has triggered previously, and we can see that in the summary. If I click on any of those options, the date, I can see the details about when did that trigger, how long was it in an alarm state, when was it acknowledged, when did it clear, kind of just those details there. If there were a delivery, it would also show me the details of who exactly did that go out to and what did that message specifically look like. So as you can tell, alarms is definitely something that is much more complicated than what I'm describing today, and we will be talking about this at length in the near future. So finally, I know we're kind of getting short on time here, so I want to do a quick run through of our reporting and logging options. So we'll switch to reporting and let's look at the reports quickly. Today I am going to skip over dashboards altogether because this is also a very heavy duty topic. Dashboards are something that we usually have 2 webinars dedicated to throughout the year, and we will have those probably within the coming months. So stay tuned for more information on dashboards. With reports, we have 2 different types of report options in Contrail. One is your on-demand reports, which are formatted queries that deliver information very quickly from the database. So those on-demand options I'm going to filter out by, and you can see that those are quick rain roll-ups for specific times, lists of active alarms, triggered alarms, any equations that are in place in the system, things like, well, what are the sensor calibrations? And this is a good example. So I'll look at the sensor calibration by system here, and we can see, okay, what are my options? I need to select my system. I'll do USGS, order by, sort order, and then up here, the archives. These are reports that have been run in the past. If I want to add a note, this is a webinar example. Great, let's go run. And you can see on demand, that took next to no time to run. And I've got all of this information about the different sensors, what slopes, offsets, references, conversions, what time zones are they using, all sorts of information at a glance, very quick, very easy to kind of do this review of, well, what is using what and what might I have to make changes to? Again, on demands are basically very quick, very basic reports that we have. For more intense reports, we refer to the analytics reports, which are really scripted programs that will do more number crunching for you. These serve as machines in the background. These are formatted and submitted as jobs to the server. And so you can actually wander away from the page and you'll receive an email when your analytics report is done. Analytics reports in general are only available to Contrail server and locally hosted options. Contrail analytics reports are currently not available to those in Contrail shared web. However, these analytics reports are great for, more in-depth analysis as well as retrieving more data from the database, such as, let's say I want to export the data from all of the sites within one particular view. So I could go to my export event data by view and specify the start and end range, the view. I can even select what sensor type I want, and then it will submit a request to get all of that data out of the database. So that way you don't have to go site by site, sensor by sensor, year by year to retrieve that data. Other things that your reports can do, we have some options for maintenance analytics reports, rainfall intensity, sensor performance, double mass analysis, so many different options here with analytics. We'll also be jumping into another webinar describing these more in depth also in the near future. So then the last thing I want to briefly cover today is going to be looking at logs. In Contrail, in general, we map everything that goes on from the data that we receive to the activity that I've done all through today. So if I want to be looking at data, I can click on the data log and this will show me across all views what individual reports were received. I can switch by system as well, and I can filter out by individual data quality if I'm looking for something in particular. I can also look to see what validation jobs have been run. So clicking on validation, well, I can see I haven't actually run any validation in here in the last 7 days. Let's check the last 30. No, okay, how about last month? Still no. Okay, not a great example, but we've got that as an option. How about the report log? What reports have been run recently? Well, now we can see the report that I just ran a few minutes ago. This is here. That's great. And if I click on it, it will take me straight to the results so that I don't have to enter the criteria for that report anymore. I did just get a question that came in. I can answer this pretty quickly. We've got, could you repeat what I said about the analytics reports versus with respect to hosted versus cloud servers? So just to clarify that, analytics reports are available to those of you who use a Contrail base station or a locally hosted server, and those are available to those who are using our cloud option, our OneRain Contrail cloud server. It's not available, analytics reports are not available to those who are using Contrail shared web at this time. I hope that helps clarify. Then back over to my logs, I can look at that report log, and then users, I can see, if I want to keep an eye on what I'm doing, I can see all of what I've done today, adding posts, deleting posts, creating new sites, adding in new contacts. So logs really serve as a great way to keep track of what's going on in your system, and they're a great point at which you can start when you're trying to troubleshoot your system. So that pretty much wraps up the time that I have for today. I'll open it up now for questions that you might have. I do want to plug, next time we'll be going over user basics. So next session, it's the third Thursday of Tuesday, same time as we always do. And that will cover what does the general user experience when they are logging into Contrail or looking at Contrail. So that's going to be everything just on that read-only user environment. So I hope you'll join me then. In the meantime, everyone, please take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you soon.